I'm working on the dump truck again. The front brakes actually went out on it. They were getting really crunchy and really noisy and not stopping very well. And then I had an issue with them. So we're going to be replacing front brakes on this today. So we'll get started. So here's how crispy it got. It's pretty nasty. It's making some crunchy noises. And actually, if you look up here, I actually had the back of the caliper blew out. And so I put a pair of vice grips on it, clamped it down. That was just to get it home because the back side of this got chewed up real bad. And I think it got into the caliper. So we're going to replace all these parts. The caliper bracket bolts were so rusted that I couldn't get them loose with regular hand tools. So I decided to fire up the torch and get them loose with that. They can't be tight if they're liquid, right? So yeah, I just warmed them up a little bit, just enough to get them to break loose. I did not torch them out of there. I did need these bolts to put back on later. I wasn't too concerned about burning any of the hoses or rubber parts because I'm going to replace all that stuff. But they did come free pretty easily. I just didn't want to damage the bolts because I did need to reuse those. This thing's pretty much junk, the whole thing. You can see there's no brake shoe left at all. It was actually leaking out here. I'm not surprised, that's all chewed up too. But I bought pretty much all the hardware kit and everything to go on this because we're going to need all of it. I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was that bad. So this is what I bought. It includes the bracket and all the new pieces and everything like that. It's a little more expensive, but I had a feeling that wasn't going to even be worth my time to tear apart. So the bolts, I did have to heat the top one to get it out of there, but it's coming apart all right, being that it's really, really crusty and rusted. I did get new brake hoses too. You probably saw me cut the brake hose with the utility knife. I normally wouldn't do that, but the brake hoses are shot too. So we're just going to go ahead and replace all this stuff all at the same time. There's no point in doing it halfway. So we'll get some new parts on it here. We're still going to have to get that disc and the hub off of there. So you do not have to take the hub nut off. Ooh, that's gonna suck. Now my tool's too big here. Hot. There it is. Yeah. Oh, I loosened it up off video. there it is. Time for new parts. Lots of cleanup.
Other ones?
Okay, so I'm going to use what's called a needle scaler. It just has little pins on it like this to take off any of the rust on the surface here, so my rotor sits flat back against there. I'm also going to do the back side of this hub extension. This is only for the dualies. You're not going to find this on a standard 1 ton. This is just for duals anyway, and this is where your wheel sits against. I'm going to do it on that face too, because I want all those faces, I want everything to sit completely flat. You don't want that rotor running a little bit off, because if it's crooked in there, you're going to get pulsation with the brakes. It's basically just going to be a vibrating point. So we're going to make sure that's all clean. I'm also going to go on this surface and I'm going to put a little bit of Never-Seez on there, just so we don't get rust and corrosion growing behind that brake and push it back out of there. So that's what we're going to do with it. So this is just silver grade anti-seize. We're just going to put a little bit on here and rub that around in between these, just so we got a little bit of corrosion protection, and also so that stuff doesn't stick. And then we'll take this and we'll just rub it around and get it on all the surfaces there. I'm going to have it all over me, but we'll get that all cleaned up. And then we can put our new rotor on there. And I purchased all these parts ahead of time. I knew that I would need all the parts in here, so I just went ahead and purchased calipers that were loaded with brackets, the shoes, or I'm sorry, the pads, and the rotor, and I even ordered all the brake hoses to go the whole way, because I didn't want to forget anything. So here's our new rotor. We're going to take that. We're going to make sure it's the same size, dimensions as the old one. Slide that on all the way back. Make sure it spins free. Looks good. Before we put our stuff together, we're actually going to clean this surface with some degreaser, because we don't want any, there might be some oil on here. They tend to oil these sometimes for sitting in, for shipping and stuff like that, so they don't rust. But that looks real good there. We're also going to put a little bit of Never-Seez on the back of this as well before we put this onto there. Same thing for the surface here. We're going to put a little bit of Never-Seez right on that flat before we put this on there, and then we'll start getting our brakes put together. Okay, so we've got our rotor back on. We've got our hub spacer back on here. We're going to put our bolts back on the whole way around here. And I'm going to have to look up torque spec for those, because I'm sure those are torqued. Alright, so we are going back together here. We got brand new brackets. I actually took the caliper off the bracket, but this bracket's going to sit in there just like that. The other thing we want to do is the surfaces right here. I don't know if you can see that. Surface right here and right there. We want to put a little bit of lubricant on that, because that's where that caliper is going to slide back and forth. So I'm going to wait till I get it on there to put the lubricant on it. You don't want to get too much there, because you don't want it slinging off onto the surface here. I actually took just some brake parts cleaner, and I cleaned the surface here with a nice clean rag. And so we're going to take our bolts and we're going to go back and put this bracket back in place here. Just get our bolts started. And then also our new calipers came with new stainless pieces. And these pieces actually go onto that surface we just talked about. They clip onto there. And what they're made to be smooth enough that it allows that brake caliper. This is the caliper that goes in place right there. So it's this piece right here that slides back and forth on there. And if these don't slide back and forth, it's going to wear the back side of your brakes really, really bad. Like the inside of it, it's going to wear it really, really bad. The front side's not going to wear, because what that does is when that clamps together, this needs to shift and slide and center itself to clamp both sides of that disc. So if it doesn't slide, you're only clamping on the back side of the disc. You're pushing out on it. So very, very important that these adjusters right here are well greased and they move nicely back and forth. Now this is a brand new unit, so we aren't going to have any issues with it. But if you were putting your original caliper back on, if it was still in good shape, you need to make sure that those move easily. So this is the disc brake caliper lube that I use. We're basically just going to put it right on that surface there and on the one at the top. And I like to put it a little bit underneath before I put my stainless piece on there, just because this surface, when it starts to corrode and rust, will push this piece up, and I want to keep that from corroding and rusting. And then I'll put a little bit more on the top surface of this where the brake pad itself goes into that notch, and that's going to allow those pads and that caliper to slide back and forth. And I'll show you once I get it together where we've put the grease. Okay, so I put the grease down in here, and then this is going to go onto there and basically just sit right like that. Now it's got a clip down in. There it goes. It's got a clip down in there, but I'm going to carefully take this grease and just put a little bit right there, but I don't want to get it, and I got a little bit on the rotor itself. That's what I don't want to do, is get any on the rotor. So I'm going to come back in. I'm going to rotate this. See, I got it on the rotor there. You don't want that. So I'm going to come back through. I'm going to take a little bit of my degreaser, brake parts cleaner, and I'm going to spray this up and clean that off. I'm going to put a little bit of lube up under this top edge, just like I did the bottom one there. And then that should be ready to put our caliper on with our brake pads. Okay, so here's our brake shoes. These come in pairs. These look pretty much exactly the same side to side, except for one difference. I'm going to try to set it on my lap and show you the difference here. The pads themselves look all the same except for this right here. There is one tab there. You'll be able to see that tab? This one doesn't have it on this side. But what that tab is it's a wear indicator. So when this pad itself starts wearing down, when it gets to a certain point, this sticks up a little bit higher than that surface right there, and it's going to squeal. And if you've ever heard somebody's brake squealing when you let off the pedal and they make a squealing noise, that is intentionally put there so it will make a squealing noise, and that's what's telling you, hey, it is time to change your brakes, because that pad is almost gone, and if you go further, you're going to have to dig into your rotor, and then you're going to need to replace your rotor. These were so far gone when I got started, it didn't matter. But when you have a tab on one of them and not on the other one, this shoe is always going to go on the inside. If I can get it in there. It's always going to go on the inside. The shoe without the indicator is going to go on the outside. Now, some of them have one on both of them, and then it doesn't matter. But on this one, it's on the inside, because this is the shoe that's going to wear first. Because this is where the pistons are that push against it. So this is going to contact first. Then the brake caliper is going to shift over. Then it's going to clamp that side. So this side will wear before the outside does. So that's why you put that one on the inside. So I'm going to get this together and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like with the shoes in place. And then the next piece we're going to put on is the caliper. There is a left and a right to these. So you need to take a look at it and think about it So when this caliper sits on here, it's going to sit just like that. Pistons are going to be on the inside, and your bleeder is going to be at the top. This is where your fluid comes into it. There's no bleeder there, there's a bleeder at the top. So that bleeder at the top has to be at the it has to be at the top, because if you put it at the bottom, you won't be able to bleed it out. So that's how you determine left and right on these. So at this point, we're going to slide this on, and then on the back side of here, there are 2 Allen bolts, one there and one there, that thread into our bracket on the back side right here. They thread into that little boss there, and that's what holds our caliper in place. And then at that point, all we have to do is go through and do our hoses and bleed them out, and this side should be ready to go. Okay, so this is what it looks like with it together. And your quick check on here, once these are in place, you should be able to slide that easily back and forth. That's how it adjusts. So that should slide back and forth nicely there. You should be able to spin that free on there. We're good to go. All we got to do is our brake lines. So I got the old brake hose out of there, and I got the new one installed. So this isn't tight yet. This is still loose, but I'm just trying to route it here. I got it run up through here and down between the 2 trailing arms here and there. There's actually a bolt with a plate where it runs across, and it's hard lined there, and then it comes back up, and this is it right here. It comes back up through here, and then it's got a sleeve on it, and there's actually a bolt back in here, and there's a wasp. There's a wasp flying around me, but here's where your line's at. This does not look like a factory line the way they've run it. That brake line that runs right here, I don't think that's factory, but it comes up here and just loops up over. One of the things you want to do when you go to tighten these, take that fitting, and basically what you're going to do is you're going to snug it up, loosen it. So I'm going to snug it this way, loosen it a little bit, snug it again, loosen it, snug it again, go a little further each time until it's good and snug. And that will help that fitting seat in there and not leak. There's nothing more troublesome than going to bleed out the brakes and you come back and there's a leak at one of your connections. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. I don't have the right wrench for it, but I'm going to snug this up, loosen it, snug it again, loosen it, snug it again. The other thing you want to make sure of is when this line comes out of here, basically the hose is going upwards. You want that to go up and away from all the suspension components, so when that wheel turns left and right, this hose is not going to get pinched. They also put a white stripe on this hose. You want that white stripe to be in line. If that stripe is twisted, you know that you've got your hose twisted. That's why they put that line on there. And this one even has a dowel pin right here, so you can't put that fitting on the wrong way. I did have to make sure that I had the right-hand side, because we're working on the right-hand side right now. But other than that, that is about it. I'll snug this up, and then we will open our bleeder, and we can start bleeding our brakes. And then we'll get our wheel back on here, and the dump truck should be stopping again.